Welcome to the September 15th, 2021 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. This meeting is being held virtually via Zoom video conference. Please be patient. We'll do our best to be efficient and allow everyone to participate equitably. This meeting is also being broadcast and streamed online by FCTV in real time. As this meeting is being recorded by Zoom and broadcast by FCTV, please be cognizant of what you say, how you say it, and what can be seen and heard in your background. The chair acknowledges the continued support and assistance of our entire staff, even though Jen left us high and dry. Kevin, Alyssa, Mark, Amy, and Kristen. Tonight we are missing, at the moment anyway, 2 commissioners. Therefore, Pat, you are once again elevated to the high chair. And I'll remind you all that for commenting, I'll call on each of you, so we're not speaking over each other. And that voting needs to be done by roll call. And though it's redundant, even if you've made the motion or the second, I'm still going to call your name for the vote. To our public participants, at any time during this meeting, you may enter any comments or questions via the chat function. At the appropriate time, they will be read into the record. The link and further instructions are located on the agenda. Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 regarding COVID-19 now participation in Zoom meetings. So if you'd like to be heard on a specific hearing, let us know via the chat function. Then at the appropriate time, I will call for public comment. When you are selected, you will be moved into the hearing as a participant. As such, you must have your video enabled, be succinct and respectful of others. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. First up, vote minutes, September 1, 2021. Anybody?
I move we accept the minutes as written and as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Courtney, who was not here, had concerns over the first set of minutes. Apparently they were repeated and that needs to be corrected.
Okay, so can we accept them as corrected, or do you want to table it or continue it for another?
It's really up to you. It's a simple change.
I'd say we can accept them as amended. And that was kind of what Pat said, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No. That's fine.
Well,
good to know. Thank you, Peter. It's good that it's known what we're doing. All right. So we have a motion and a second to accept as amended. Betsy?
I filter aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin?
O'Brien, aye.
Pat?
Harris, aye.
Peter?
Walsh, aye.
Steve?
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have accepted the minutes as amended. Next up are vote minutes from July 14th. And just to be clear, this is Kristen's, I don't know if the right word is interpretation, but she's taken them from the Zoom meeting as we didn't have an official recording secretary at the time. Anybody?
I move that we accept the minutes as written, subject to any modifications proposed tonight.
Second.
All right. We have a motion to accept as written. Betsy?
Filter aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin?
O'Brien, aye.
Pat?
Harris, aye.
Peter?
Walsh, aye.
Steve?
Pat and I.
Thank you. It is unanimous. We have accepted them as submitted. Next up is a request for a continuance under a determination of applicability. First up is Susan Gooston, 212 Meadow Neck Road, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to vista prune according to FWR 10.18 10B. Mr. Newton.
Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until September 22nd.
Bird, so move.
Courtney's in the house.
Harris, second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to continue this RDA until 9/22. Betsy,
Glatfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Harris, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
and Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have continued this RDA until 9/22. Next up is a request for a continuance under a notice of intent. First up is Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, 86 Water Street, Woods Hole, Mass, for permission to replace the existing Iceland Marine Facility at 86 Water Street in Woods Hole. The proposed work will involve A, the in-kind replacement of the existing pile-supported dock, B, reconstruction and reconfiguration of the deteriorated bulkhead and small boat slips, C, installation of autonomous vessel port, D, dredging along the facility's west berth, and E, site redevelopment, including demolition of the Iceland building and construction of a new waterfront building. A lot of reading for continuance. Mr. Newton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant's requesting a continuance to either September 29th or October 6th. As of right now, both of those hearings are relatively light, but there will be more continuances tonight. It's really at the preference of the commission.
You have a feel which would be better?
I would recommend probably the 29th, so that way if we are able to get things moving before then with the peer review, we'll be able to have the hearing that night. If not, we could always continue.
Okay.
Okay, I'll move to continue it to the 29th.
Our second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to continue this NOI until 9/29. Betsy?
So I'm recused from this hearing, so I'm
Yep,
just not
I'm
gonna
sorry.
vote.
That's okay. Courtney?
Bird, aye.
I just didn't want to exclude you.
I-
Matthews,
I
aye. Kevin?
appreciate that.
O'Brien, aye.
Pat?
Harris, aye.
Peter?
Walsh, aye.
Steve?
Patton, aye.
All right. It is, I don't know if you'd call it unanimous with a recusal, but it passes anyway. We continue to 9/29. Next up are requests for determination of applicability. First up, Stephen Toasty, 430 Davisville Road, Unit 4, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to upgrade to a new Title V sewage disposal system for unit number 4. Mr. Newton?
Mr. Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Bird, so move.
Patton, second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy?
Glatfelter, aye.
Courtney?
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin?
O'Brien, aye.
Pat?
Harris, aye.
Peter?
Walsh, aye.
Steve?
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next one is continued. Therefore, next up is Kenneth Foreman, Marine Biological Laboratory, 0 Minot Road, parcel 46A 02-000-0005, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to install a concrete pad and water sampling instrument. Mr. Newton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and a -3 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Bird, so move, and I'd like about a 1 or 2 sentence amplification of what this is.
Essentially, they're going to be they're proposing to install a mechanism to measure the water quality at preset intervals.
Mm-hmm. And so they need a concrete pad to do that?
They do to ensure that it's able to remain intact.
Okay. Is that, are they going to remove it afterwards?
I'm not sure about that, Courtney. They did not go that in depth with their proposal.
My understanding, if I may, is that it's temporary, and that was going to be my question, was define temporary. But Courtney, my understanding of the pad is like you'd put under an air conditioning compressor.
Okay, so it can be,
You know,
picked
not
up
a
and taken
footing
out.
per se, but
Okay.
a pad. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's
I don't want to
kinda
get hung up on
non-invasive.
this. I just want to understand
yeah.
what the scope was.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That just when they just when you write the thing up or approval, I think there should be just note that the pad should be removed when they're done.
Yeah, and see if you can find out how long temporary is. Yes, temporary. There's a chat thing, 5 years. Long temporary, but temporary nonetheless.
Walsh, second.
Thank you. Anybody else have any question about it? All right. We have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy,
Gladfelder, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Harris, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. And bear with me 1 second.
Bird, second.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Ann, for the input. All right, next up. Cornelius Hurley and Old Silver Beach Homeowners Association, Inc., 0 Santuit Road, 046, 30 Nauset Avenue West, and 34 Nauset Avenue West, North Falmouth, Mass. For permission to selectively remove invasive vines, litter, and yard waste. Mr. Newton?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Staff recommends a -2 under the state and a -3 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Bird, so move.
Harris,
Walsh,
second.
second.
A little sluggish on the seconds here. All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy,
Gladfelder, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Harris, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, Michael J. Denomi, trustee, 145 Walker Street, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to construct an addition and install a dry well. Mr. Newton?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Staff recommends a -2 under the state and a -3 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Bird, so move. And the question is, this is basically a floodplain issue?
Yes, it's
Okay.
located in flood zone AE only.
Okay, thank you. We need a
Walsh,
Harris,
second.
second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Any other questions? All right. Betsy,
Gladfelder, aye.
Courtney,
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Harris, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up is a continued request for determination of applicability. 267 Clinton Ave LLC, 267 Clinton Avenue, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to upgrade and maintain an on-site sewage disposal system. Mr. Newton?
Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting to withdraw their application without prejudice.
All right,
There's no action needed then.
correct. All right, so 267 is withdrawn. All right, next up are requests for hearing under notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First up, Arthur Muse, 148 Antlers Shore Drive, East Falmouth, Mass. For permission to construct a vinyl bulkhead to reconstruct a previously licensed dock. Mr. Newton?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have promoted Michael Borselli as a panelist. Mike, do you need anyone else promoted?
I do not.
All right, the floor is yours.
Thank
Well,
you.
Mike,
Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, for the record, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant AJ Muse. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to share my screen.
yes, sir.
I'm showing you an aerial photo of the general vicinity of the applicant's parcel. The parcel's highlighted in yellow, number 148, Antlers Shore Drive. It's on Eel Pond, the water body that separates Antler Shore Drive from Seacoast and Edgewater Drive West is on the opposite side of the water body. There's a series of recreational docks, various residential dwellings in and around the area. This is the parcel in question. I'll be presenting immediately after this 154, just for reference. 148 currently has a licensed fixed dock. There is a small beach. If you look at the light sand color, this is the sandy beach, and then you'll see that it's sort of scalloped out. This is due to erosion that's occurring in this area. All of the surrounding parcels, there are no beaches nearby for some distance. There are some bulkheads. There's some stone revetments. To the north, there's a salt marsh. There's a right-of-way directly adjacent. And to the south, in front of 154, there's a dredged area that was permitted to be dredged decades ago. More salt marsh, another dredged area, and more salt marsh. The site plan. The site plan that we prepared shows the parcel, single-family dwelling shed on the waters of Eel Pond. So we have land containing shellfish, land under the ocean. We have a coastal beach. And if you look, you'll see mean high water with that curved sort of scalloping effect that I showed you in the aerial photo. Here's the existing fixed pier that was licensed in the mid-90s. There's actually an order of conditions in the application that shows that it was allowed to be licensed and maintained. There was also permission to do some beach nourishment at that time. What Mr. Muse has encountered subsequent to the mid-90s is continual erosion of the waterfront such that the coastal beach size has diminished dramatically. There's been significant erosion through the decades on this eastern shore of Antler Shores. In fact, if you look at the plan, you'll see the border of the plan is 120 feet and 80 feet. And you'll notice where mean high water is. So a large part of the lot is actually now part of Eel Pond. I actually have an old plan of record here. Mr. Muse's lot is 155. You can see that way back in 1926, when this was laid out, this was all a public beach along the waterfront that has all since eroded and been developed. So there's very significant evidence of ongoing erosion. And through the years, Mr. Muse attempted to do beach nourishment, but most recently he's started to observe within his house cracks in the foundation, and he's become very concerned about further erosion. There's actually a very, it's hard to see, there's a railroad tied border along the edge of the beach that sort of acts as a boundary between the beach and an existing deck, which is shown here. This is a This is a walkout structure, so the grade on the street is higher than the grade on the water side. And under the deck is access into the house. The basement foundation is showing some cracking. So what we're proposing to do is install a sheet pile bulkhead that would actually link up and join with the property next door, that the 154 application that's after this one. The Muses and the Fontanas are close neighbors, and this is sort of a joint effort between the two to do the, if you were to approve both projects, they'd go forward at the same time with the same contractor. So this line work here is showing or depicting where this vinyl sheet piling bulkhead would be installed into the beach. And this is sort of a proactive approach to mitigate against further erosion, because if the beach continued to erode, it would threaten the house. And continually adding beach nourishment to the beach seems to be doomed to failure. All that happens is it erodes out into the channel. In fact, if you look at the aerial photo closely, you'll see the shoaling right off shore here. And there's a section here, the sand just washes out and it stacks up here. So the plan is to install this as a first line of defense against erosion if the beach were to continue to erode. There's a cross section on the plan that shows the sheet piling wall, and interestingly enough, when it's installed, if it were approved and installed in the near future, there's a very small exposed portion of the wall. Probably only 12 to 15 inches of it would be exposed. You can see where mean high water is in the current beach profile. If the beach were to erode, it's likely to meet a natural angle of repose, which would probably end up eroding out this section of beach if it were to happen, and probably expose 3 to 4 feet of this bulkhead. So by installation of the bulkhead, you're not creating a vertical wall because you still have the beach in front. But if the beach were to erode, there would then become a low profile bulkhead, which would be the final defense against further erosion into the upland, and then further compromising or possibly causing real issues with the house foundation. So that is the plan for the bulkhead. The access would be by barge offshore. It would be driven and tied back using helical anchors. I think you've seen this detail on other projects. It would have a timber whale beam system and a timber cap, and it would blend to the existing grade right outside the deck on the walkout level. So there's no plans to do any excavation. It's just install a vibratory hammer from the barge. We do show up with secondary construction access because there would be some things that would be delivered over this grass area to the site. The second element of the project is to rebuild this licensed dock in the same configuration, same material, same size pilings, no extension, no realignment, just simply rebuild it in its licensed position. There's a typical cross-section on the plan of the typical construction you're familiar with on other docks, and there's also a profile. And then there's some specifications on how to install the helicals if you're interested in some more details. So if this were to go forward, it would be a companion project to the abutter to the south, or I guess I should say to the west, or just next door. And I think that sums it up. I'm happy to answer questions.
Mike. Kevin and/or Alyssa, do you want to start?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll start off and Alyssa can share her comments afterwards. Mike, you had referenced some beach nourishment a couple times during your presentation. Can you tell me when the beach nourishment occurred on this property and if the property owner had pulled a permit for that work?
There was an order of conditions issued in the mid-90s, which if I share my screen again,
sure.
Show you. And it allowed for beach nourishment. Approval is given to conduct beach nourishment and maintain and license the existing timber pier. So through the life of that order of conditions, beach nourishment did occur. Recently, in April of 2020, Mr. Muse did some minor beach nourishments without the benefit of a permit, and he was caught, I guess is the simple word, and told to stop doing it, and he did. And then he contacted us to proceed with the proper permitting process for any further work he was going to propose.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up just to make sure that it was clear that, you know, permits required for that work.
Yes,
as you know, and
he totally understands.
Okay, very good. And there's no nourishment that's being proposed as a part of this project.
No, it's really not a viable solution because of the active erosion. It doesn't really want to stay there very long. It just drifts out into the channel.
Okay, that sort of is a good segue into my next comment is regarding the letter from DMF. Have you had an opportunity to take a look at that?
Yeah, we received that today, and it makes reference to considering alternatives, and we frankly don't believe there's any viable alternative because of the close proximity to mean high water. Any coir system or anything of that effect would be eroded away. If you've been to the site, I think it's clear that it's an actively eroding site. So we talked about that with Mr. Muse, but my recommendation to him is that I don't believe there's a viable soft solution. If we were left with no other choices, we would probably come back for beach nourishment, although we don't think that's even a very viable solution. But we certainly don't think planting or any soft solutions would last at all, based on what we've observed through review of aerial photos and old maps.
Okay.
Oh.
In addition to those comments, so the whole commissioners have received the letter from DMF. So they were suggesting taking a look at a soft solution here with core fiber logs and beach nourishment here. Historically, we've incorporated recommendations from DMF within our review, but that's something the commission should look at. One other thing that I wanted to ask you about is about the rebuilding of the dock to its Chapter 91 license. So Alyssa had done the field work on this project. She noted that there may have been some sort of extension to the dock. And I just wanted to ask you about that, if you had noticed that during your surveying or.
Yes, I'm well aware of it. Again, I'm going to share my screen again. Aerial photos are a great thing, I guess. There's aerial photos, depends on what side of the issue you are on, I suppose. This aerial photo, which is the most recent one, shows this rectangular shaped thing, which is actually a float. And there are other aerial photos that show that float in season in this position, lashed against the pilings. And again, the applicant's been made aware that that doesn't have a permit, it doesn't have a license, and it needs to no longer be installed unless he files for permission to install it. So that has been removed. I believe it's been removed from the site and will not come back to the site unless it receives proper permits. The reason he had installed that, he was unaware that he needed permission for a float. It facilitated access to his, he has a low gunnel boat, a Boston whaler that tied here, and it's difficult to get from the higher fixed pier to the boat. So he had obtained the float, and that's why it was there. But he has been told that the float must not be reinstalled without permission.
Okay. All right. Believe that sums up what I would like to talk about. Alyssa, do you have anything you would like to add?
Yeah, sure. I'll just finish up my comments from the staff report. Mike, I noticed that there's a shed on the property that's hovering over the property line.
Yes.
So we were just concerned, I think either the shed should be moved fully onto the property or just receive permission from the neighbor that having part of the shed on their property is okay.
Yeah, the shed has been in the position. I guess I'll share my screen again. The shed is in this position for the commissioners to see. This is a private way owned by the estate of Baker. If you look on old maps, it's not a public way, it's a private owned way. And Mr. Muse has a relationship with the Baker family, and he has reached out to them. This shed's been here for a very long time. He has reached out to them to obtain permission to allow it to remain. We think it's less environmentally impacted to leave it in place versus move it. If he does not get permission, then he would be faced with no choice but to remove it. So he's working on that.
Sounds good. I had two other quick comments. There was a small kind of storage unit looking thing right on the north side of the driveway. If you can just add that to the plan.
Yes, I'll have to get more information on that, but I'm happy to add that to the plan.
Yeah, I can send you a picture too, if that's helpful.
Okay.
And then I think my last comment, just as staff was reviewing the project, we weren't sure if the proposed bulkhead meets some of the coastal beach performance standards, and just wanted to list that in the staff report and let the commission review and ultimately decide.
Sure. If I could speak to that, you're making reference to FWR 10.27, paragraph 5.
Yeah.
The installation of the shore guard bulkhead will not increase the likelihood of erosion because it's going to be installed landward of the coastal beach, and there's only going to be a very small amount of it exposed. So any erosion that occurs here is not occurring because of the installation of this proposed bulkhead. So the bulkhead in and of itself isn't increasing erosion. That section of the regulations also talks about change in form of beaches and downdrift beaches. Again, I would just like to say that installation of this bulkhead on the upper edge of the beach won't change the form of that beach. If anything, any form changes occur on this beach, it will be for other probably naturally occurring activities like storms and things that would cause erosion from the tide. I had also alluded to in this aerial photo that there are no downdrift beaches of concern. It's entirely either salt marsh or man-made coastal engineering structures in all areas. So the bulkhead installation in and of itself isn't going to create any impacts or concerns as it relates to this section of your regulations, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
All right. You guys are all set. All right, let's start with Steve. You have questions, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After reading the DMF proposal and then hearing Mr. Briselli's explanation of his position, I found it compelling. I am not the scientist in our group, but as far as regulations go, it appears that it could be a good alternative to do, and I would agree that the erosion there is likely to continue to occur. And a soft solution may not be appropriate. So my questions were about the dock, but they've already been addressed earlier by the staff as usual. So I had no other questions other than that comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Peter?
Staff has answered my questions. Thank you.
Pat?
No questions or comments, thanks.
All right. Kevin?
No questions or comments, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Courtney?
I missed part of the presentation due to computer problems. So if I'm repeating myself, bear with me. So the issue is the regulations on coastal armoring versus a soft solution. And clearly Mike has laid out an argument that because this bulkhead would be installed further away from the beach, it isn't essentially fall under that 1978 provision. Am I understanding you correctly, Mike?
Not entirely. What I was trying to suggest was there was a specific regulation pointed out by Alyssa, FWR 10.27, that talks about impacts to coastal beaches that could occur from activities that are proposed. And what I had tried to argue was that the bulkhead itself is being installed in a position that's on the landward edge or most furthest from the tidal zone, and it was to be installed in a position such that the entire beach in front of it would have to erode before the bulkhead itself is exposed. So the bulkhead isn't causing erosion. The bulkhead is a final line of defense against further erosion into the house.
Yeah, okay, so but that in my mind presumes a static situation. And we know it isn't static. So if it erodes back to the bulkhead, now the bulkhead becomes armoring, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, okay. So that's the issue that we're going to have to wrestle with.
Right, but if I could just follow up, Commissioner Byrd, the regulation discusses impacts to down-drift beaches that this bulkhead could cause because it's limiting the ability of sediment to transport through them. There are no down-drift beaches that would benefit from the sediment that erodes off this beach.
So where does the sediment go then?
Into the channel, and it just shoals.
So does do the regulations under the state regulations that have this provision of no armoring after 1978, do they have an exception for sediments that end up in channels rather than nourishing beaches downwind?
They don't have an exception, but what the regulation actually says is and it actually speaks to eroding coastal banks, not eroding coastal beaches. And what it says is if the eroding coastal bank, I guess we can talk about it as a beach, but if the erosion contributes to downdrift beaches and provides storm damage prevention and flood control, because the sediment nourishes those other beaches, then armoring may not be allowed on projects where the houses were built after 1978. This house was built well before 1978.
Okay, you've, I mean, we could go on with this argument back and forth.
Mhm.
So obviously, we're going to end up deliberating on it, but I just wanted to bring the discussion up for the record.
Understood. Thank you.
All right, good, Courtney.
I'm done.
Thank you. Betsy,
Yeah, Courtney, that what you're talking about is armoring coastal banks, and this is not a coastal bank. This is putting a bulkhead on a beach. And I agree, getting back to Steve, agreeing with Mike, a soft solution isn't going to work here.
Mhm.
If they're having trouble with their foundation, it's because, you know, any kind of pounding of storm waves on that beach is, you know, going through all the sediment that's right into the house foundation. Do they have a basement in that house?
Yes.
But it's not, it mustn't be very high above sea level, is it?
No, it's a walkout. So when you walk out of the basement, you're walking out underneath the deck, basically onto the beach. So it's about a foot higher than the beach right now, or maybe 18 inches.
So everything under that basically is sand.
Right.
So when you have pounding into that area, it's going to impact what's underneath there. And in fact, it could also, if you put this sheet piling in, am I correct that it's going to go in about 12 feet?
Yes.
Yeah, so the potential is even there, depending on how big a storm, sand could be sucked out from underneath there. But certainly it's going to be better than the situation that you have right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I agree. This is a soft solution. It wouldn't buy you anything for this area. How far offshore is the dredge going to be?
The barge?
Barge, yeah. It doesn't look like it's that deep offshore there.
Well, the barge is going to be just offshore, probably in line with the end of the dock. The leading edge of the barge facing shore will probably be about the same distance as where the dock currently is. The water depth at low tide is about 2 feet. And at high tide, it's about 3.5 feet. So he would have to work with the tides to mitigate against the barge bottoming out at times of low tide.
Okay, so I'm sure Alyssa or Kevin are jotting down notes if we were to approve this project, that those conditions would have to be put in.
Yeah, I would expect that. I mentioned that in my narrative.
And the other comment about that I have about the float, that I know the float's not permitted, and I know you're not asking for permission for it, but were you to be asking for permission, and were we to grant permission, it's not allowed to be stored in a resource area.
Absolutely, understood. And my client's been clearly made aware of that.
Yeah, these are difficult. These are difficult issues, right? Because our regulations weren't necessarily anticipating that we were going to lose or alternatively gain beach in areas. So you're right, Courtney. It isn't static, but the regulations are sort of written as if the world were static.
Well, that was precisely my point of raising this. Much more for us to consider all the ramifications of what a decision like this to allow it implies. And that's really the reason I raised it. It's not necessarily that I oppose the thing, because in a practical sense, it's a decent solution. It's just simply, I got to look at what are the regulatory issues and what precedents do we set?
Well, if I could, one more thing, Mr. Chairman, Betsy's correct. The regulations, I believe Courtney's alluding to, are relative to coastal banks, but there's similar fact patterns to the coastal beach. So this is one of those situations where you have to demonstrate there's no viable alternative, and you also have to demonstrate that the house existed prior to 78. Because it's sort of, you should have known better because we had rules if you built in this area after 78. So I think you have the ability on each project to make findings and look at them on a case by case and not be worried about setting a precedent.
Betsy, anything else?
I'm okay. Thanks, Jamie.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Kevin, are there any public chat comments?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any comments in the chat.
Thank you. Anything else from the commission? All right. What are you thinking, folks?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Patton, second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to close the hearing. There are no public comments. Taking the vote. Betsy.
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney.
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin.
O'Brien, aye.
Pat.
Harris, aye.
Peter.
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have closed this hearing. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
I know you're not going anywhere, but. All right. Next up, George, Mary, and Leopold Fontana, 154 Antler Shore Drive Trust, 154 Antler Shore Drive, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to reconstruct a previously licensed bulkhead and dock. Mr. Newton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Michael Borselli will be presenting this project.
Welcome, Mike. Haven't seen you in a long time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, for the record, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, representing the Fontanas. If I could share my screen, I will show the same aerial photo, and just, it's not highlighted in yellow, but it's next door at number 154. You can see there's a single family dwelling. They store their boats in their driveway. There's an existing parallel dock, which meets up with the abutter, Mr. Muse, next door. There is a Chapter 91 plan from 1994 prepared by Mr. Jack Landers Colley. So he was a young, vibrant man back in 1994. Still very vibrant though. Not quite as young. So this is
how Mike.
This is the site plan that shows the same dock configuration that was on the license plan. The water body is the same, Eel River, land under the ocean, land containing shellfish. There is a salt marsh just offshore. I had made reference on the aerial photo to a dredged area that was permitted to be dredged. It makes reference on the Chapter 91 plan, historic mean high water, and an area that was referenced as dredged area back in 1994. It shows the bulkhead and decking. Nothing's changed except for perhaps one detail that's in the staff report that I'll get to in a minute, and I'm still really not clear on that, but I'm sure your staff will clarify things for me. This is the same type of system that was proposed next door as far as the bulkhead goes, except this bulkhead actually does have some exposure. the maximum exposed height of this bulkhead would be 6 feet. There's an existing bulkhead under the dock now. That's a series of horizontal planks that are held. I don't really know how it's still surviving, to be honest, but it's definitely rotting away. If you were able to stick your head underneath and look, which is kind of hard to do without being afraid to fall in the water, but you can do it. You'll see everything underneath is sort of falling apart and degrading, rotting. So we're proposing to install in its same location the sheet piling wall and tie it back with helical anchors, and then replace the dock in the same configuration with alignment. We intend to make use of the whale beam on the sheet piling to hold up the landward side of this dock, so there's less pilings necessary. The yoke and stringers would be supported on the continuous whale beam on the landward side, and then pilings would be installed on the seaward face, as shown here. And nothing changes in the size whatsoever. Same contractor would be used. Same concerns about depth at low tides. For the barge, we would expect the same condition for the barge being floating at all tides. There was one comment in the staff report, and I think it was alluding to the stairs that are existing here. I think the comment was that these are a different size and shape than what was shown on this plan. Oops, sorry about that. If you look, I have to zoom in on this. These stairs here look a little different. I looked on aerial photos and I can't really see these stairs on any aerial photos until 2005. The photos I had access to didn't show. I was trying to see if I could see when there was a time when that was rebuilt and it was built slightly bigger, but I couldn't really find any evidence. All I have is the 2 plans. So it does appear from Jack Landis-Colley's plan that this is a little bit different, but I don't know when it happened. If this needs to be adjusted, I suppose we could adjust it, but it's the access stairs down to the dock that currently exist. We were hoping to just maintain them with the new dock. I think that sums it up. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Newton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'll start off with the stairs. So like you said, they do appear to have been constructed a little larger than what was approved under the Chapter 91 license. So when that is reconstructed, would you be able to construct it as it was approved, or is that a constraint with the environment there?
I'm not sure of how to answer that. I'd have to give that some thought. I do have a photo of those stairs. I believe, if you wanted to see that, that might shed
Mike,
some.
did you not say that those stairs were not in the original Chapter 91?
They were shown, but they look as though they're a little different size.
Okay.
I have a good picture of it right here. I think these are the stairs we're talking about. So these look like they might have been rebuilt at some point in time, and they work well with the way the grade is. So if possible, we'd like to just maintain them with the new dock and just remarry the decking to the underside of this stairway.
Okay. I don't really see an environmental impact from that, but do you need to alter your Chapter 91 license to have that be permitted through the state?
No, because it's above mean high water.
Okay.
That's not part of the Chapter 91 license, is it?
No.
It doesn't have to be part.
No, it was just shown for reference back.
Okay. Okay, so that's something the commission could consider. Otherwise, I think Alyssa had mentioned that there was an AC unit and a storage bin on the driveway that wasn't identified, and that should be added to the plan.
Yep, understood.
Alyssa, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I'm all set. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Pat, we'll start with you.
Mike, I'm a little confused about the location of the bulkhead on this property. I did not hang my head over the decking to see, but I was told by the landowner that it was in fact landwood, on the landwood side of the decking, just as you described. But yes. I'm looking at page 19 of the chapter. Actually, it's plan 518, page 19 of the chapter 91 license. And it looks to me on that cross section that the bulkhead is on the water side of the decking.
Yeah, I noticed that too, but the reality is it's not like that. So I don't understand why it was shown like that on this plan.
How does that implicate, you're being in compliance with chapter 91?
Well, what I believe the reality is, as compared to what's shown on that plan, is that the bulkhead is actually more landwood than the license allowed. So it's actually less licensed structure than what they got in chapter 90 license.
Don't they, I can appreciate what your position that you're taking, but wouldn't you have to amend a license to show it where it actually is?
Well, I would probably get what's called a minor modification to the license that I would pursue if you folks wanted that to be a condition. It's probably something, I need to get a modification of the license anyway because we're rebuilding it and we're using different materials. So there's a process where you get a minor modification instead of a brand new chapter 91 license. And I would, if a order of conditions were issued, I would reach out to Brendan Mulaney at DEP, Division of Wetlands and Waterways, and tell him what we're up to and get his guidance on how to handle the modification.
Okay. It seems much more reasonable to have the bulkhead up against the land mass rather than out in the water. So that was my only question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Kevin.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Courtney?
I have no questions.
Betsy?
No questions or comments.
Steve?
No questions.
Peter?
No questions.
All right. Mr. Newton, is there anything in the public chat function?
I do not see anything in the chat at this time.
All right.
So I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Harris, second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to close the hearing and take it under advisement. Let it be noted there are no public comments or questions. So we're going to take a vote. Betsy?
Upfilter, aye.
Courtney?
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin?
O'Brien, aye.
Pat?
Harris, aye.
Peter?
Walsh, aye.
Steve?
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have closed this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Boselli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, commissioners. Have a good night.
You as well.
Mike, have you moved your office?
No. Why?
How long have you been at Academy Lane?
Oh, 8 years maybe.
Oh, all right. Shows you what I know.
I did move my office, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Have a good night, folks.
Good night.
Thanks, Mike. Next up, Joy Kaplan, trustee. Joy Kaplan, 2003 revocable trust, 41 Bywater Court, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct a second floor addition, expand an existing entry porch, and all associated excavation, grading, mitigation, plantings, and landscaping. Mr. Newton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am promoting Nathan Gosh-Garian from Holmes and McGrath to present the project. Nate, do you need anyone else promoted?
Nate, you're on mute.
Okay, there we go. Hey, okay. Hey, yeah, so Kelly Connellan is going to be watching, but I just asked that if there's any questions that specifically pertain to architectural components of the project, we can promote her at that time. That works.
All right, you're up, sir.
Okay, thank you. Permission to share my screen. You guys can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the property that we're talking about tonight is 41 Bywater Court. This is a residentially developed single-family home on a property that consists of about 16,000 square feet.
Excuse me, Nate, if you're sharing a
beautiful
plan, we
picture,
can't
but I
see
don't
it.
think it's the one you intend.
Oh, is it the owl? Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right,
my
so
fellow chair.
currently existing is a single-family home, a front porch, a rear deck, a shed in the backyard, landscaping, and a paved driveway. As we can see, the entire property is in land subject to coastal storm flowage, specifically AE12. And then the only other resource that we have on or within 100 feet of the property is bordering vegetated wetlands. So I think I'm going to break this project up into two different components. The first component is the addition of a second story to the first floor. In this project, we're going to be utilizing the first floor foundation. So subsequently, there will be no increase to the footprint, and as a result, no increase in impervious area. And then the second portion of this project is to reconfigure and this front porch right here, as well as a window seat. So this portion of the project is where we get a slight increase in impervious area. Specifically, the number comes out to 82. So if we look at the setbacks that are based off of this freshwater wetland delineation, we can see that all the additions that we are proposing are within FWR resource area buffer zone B, which requires a 2-to-1 mitigation ratio. So 82 times 2 is 164. We rounded that up to 165, and we're proposing that that additional 165 square feet of mitigation plantings go in the northeast corner up here, which is in FWR resource area buffer A. I think in terms of the project scope, I don't have much more than that. At this time, I can address one of the points that was made in the staff report. So I'll read the following from the staff report and then follow up with a response from the structural engineer. So the question posed was, the letter expressed that the existing foundation was in good condition, but that minor alterations are recommended to support the load. Will these improvements require excavation around the house? The short answer is no. But I will quote Cole Bateman, who is the structural engineer from this project. And he says, the proposed improvements would not require excavation. Rather, the work would be performed within the structure or above grade around the perimeter of the structure. I think that's it from my end, and we'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. You can stop sharing, please.
I'll get that one day, I promise.
Right, Mr. Newton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Nate, thanks for touching on that comment in Alyssa's staff report. Were you able to secure a stamp from a architect or a structural engineer?
Okay, so the answer is I have a response with that same question to Cole Bateman. So I think I can kind of get it more directly with his response. So I'm going to paraphrase this. In Massachusetts, there is not a recognized licensure specific to structural engineering, commonly referred to as the SE designation in other states. Rather, it falls under the professional engineer stamp with a focus in civil engineering. I, or Cole Bateman, took the PE exam in the structural discipline, which is different from what a land developer / geotechnical / environmental engineer would take. However, each discipline technically falls under the purview of civil engineering. So it sounds like there is not a specific like stamp-wise denotation for that, but it's captured under the umbrella of civil engineering, the structural component of it.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. Jamie, Courtney, do you have any input on this?
Yeah, I disagree with that statement, but I won't say that I know better. I've seen structural engineer stamps. And I know structural engineers that don't ply their trade as a civil engineer, but that could be a, like Nate said, an umbrella. Courtney?
The biggest issue that we're having here is that is the scope of work. And the question that I was looking for was, have you people done, or your engineer done, or caused to be done, test borings that show what the soil bearing capacity is? Because if you're dealing with peat, which is very likely what you've got there, then you have to get deep enough to get down to either the soil is below peat or whatever.
Courtney, they're not adding foundation.
I understand.
That's the whole question about the existing
but they
foundation.
are putting piers in that are going to support the load. That's what I'm concerned about. And so what I don't want to do, and that's where this is coming from, what I don't want to do is say approve a project, and then you guys get started on it and suddenly find that you've got to do considerably more site work there than you originally anticipated. And that changes the scope. And I like to know going into the project that this is potential. I'd rather approve it up front for two reasons. One, it saves you time as a contractor doing the work, because now you don't have to stop and come to us and get permission. And the second thing is it saves us time because we don't have to reconsider something we've already heard. I'm just being practical for everybody's benefit, your benefit and ours. And I'd much rather have you come in and say, you know what, the soils, we don't know about the soils, and so we are going to test them. We will tell you what we're going to have to do, worst case scenario. Then the project is approved that way. We move forward, we can condition it right, and you don't have to worry about us, and we can move on. That's why I'm doing this, not to be a pain in the neck.
Yeah. I appreciate your statement and your question. There's a lot of detail in there. I can say that, in short, we've got a memorandum from the structural engineer who looked at the loading capacity of the primary structure, and with his authority, gave his expert opinion that it was viable to build on top of. I can't, off the top of my head, go into anything more specific in terms of soil borings, but I am looking at the memorandum right here. And it does address a few of the components that you spoke about. But like I said, he has given his opinion that the primary structure is viable for a secondary structure on top, or second floor rather.
Okay, so basically when we approve this, you won't need to come back to us because the scope of work changes and you're going to have to amend the project. Is that what you're saying? That's
what I'm saying.
But we've done something like this before where it is conditioned that if you do have to come back, it does have to come back as an amendment and not, and potentially new order. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right, Kevin, continue, please. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So from a staff standpoint, to be consistent, we have historically required that stamp. So that is something the commission is going to have to decide upon during this hearing. Other than that, the project is entirely in the outer buffer zone B, I believe. It's landward of the house, away from the resource area. So the impacts are, relatively minimal opposed to other projects that we see. And we just had one comment regarding the driveway, in that it seems to have increased in size a bit between 2017 and 2018. However, this area is only in land subject to coastal storm flowage, so it would not have required mitigation plantings, but it should have been permitted. Melissa, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, my only
Betsy, you want to
point.
start?
Yeah.
Hold on, Courtney. Betsy?
Thanks, Jamie. I agree with Courtney that this is probably built on peat. This is, if everybody flips open their phone to their maps, you'll see that what's right behind there is the remnants of a salt marsh with water in it. And it's labeled as bordering vegetated wetland. And I don't know whether there's any salt water there or not, whether there's any salt marsh there or not. But at any rate, what's under the house is undoubtedly peat. This whole area has been filled in, as we've heard in other projects that we've had here. So what I would just suggest is that when we deliberate, we can have a condition that if people are uncomfortable with the letter that came in, I mean, we can talk to Jen about it too, because she might have had to deal with this. But then, have the provision that we need if we're not entirely comfortable with this, that we need a structural engineer. I mean, I don't know, the projects I've dealt with, you definitely need structural engineers. And I don't know, but I haven't looked to see that there's a special stamp that says, is there, Kevin, a stamp? You've seen ones that say structural engineer?
Yeah, I believe we have had those submitted to us for previous projects, or we've had architectural stamps certifying the ability for the foundation to support the load of a second story addition.
Yeah, well, there are two things though that Courtney brought up. It's not just that the foundation couldn't support this. This is presumably if you add another floor, you're adding twice as much weight. I think Courtney's saying, can what's there, this might be fine if it were on bedrock, or it might be fine if it were on sand, but if it's on peat, is it going to work? So I think if we close it tonight, we have to have a discussion and leave it whether we need more information.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Yep.
All right. Sorry.
I'm going to add in here. I was in the construction business for 30 years. And I had a number of projects that were in similar kinds of situations where all of a sudden we had a change in the scope of work, and I had to deal with the fact that all of a sudden I had to put a foundation in and it was sitting on peat. And that meant an excavation of 2 or 3 feet, 5 feet wide. It was right on the edge of the marsh. And I had to get a structural engineer to come in and certify that what I was doing, before I did it, what I was going to do was going to bear the load. And he would write a letter and he would put his structural engineer's stamp on it. That's what I'm looking for here. If you can't find one, then go find one.
And I interrupt you, Courtney. So if you look at his last page where he signed it, the gray area for me is the stamp says civil. Typically, any structural engineer I've worked with, his stamp says, it doesn't say civil, it says structural. So I don't know, like I said, you said, Nate, you said that, it's kind of under the one big title. So, but I look at his signature line that says senior structural engineer. So at the risk of sounding like we're calling his bluff, because I don't really mean that in that way, if he is in fact a structural engineer and he's stamping it, I mean, it's just a difference that it doesn't say structural. Now, having said that, so let's again, if you will, and I mean no disrespect to the man, okay? Yeah. If in fact this is true, he is actually the structural engineer that it says on here. In his evaluation, he is saying that this foundation will carry this load. Courtney, if you look under the first paragraph,
Okay.
he's saying the loading on the foundation is approximately 50 to 60% of the gravity load. Therefore, the capacity is likely. And we've seen verbiage like that in the past. So, I mean, that to me, that's kind of what you're looking for. Right?
It is, but it makes me a bit nervous when the guy wants to qualify what his authority is by saying, by obfuscating the point. He comes in and he has a stamp and it says structural engineer, and he says, I've looked at it and it holds the load. He's taking full responsibility for the project. That's why he's a professional engineer. That's why he carries professional liability. When I'm reading these kinds of statements where he's qualifying what his qualifications are to make these judgments, I get nervous.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bateman, who is the engineer of question here, has his hand raised. May I promote him to speak?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you.
Is he in?
He has just been promoted, Mr. Chairman.
Hi, good evening.
Hello, Mr. Bateman.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just chimed in maybe 10 minutes ago, so I heard just the brief end of the conversation. So maybe I could just point out or start by letting you know my qualifications. So I'm a structural engineer by trade. But however, in Massachusetts, in order to be a PE structural engineer, it's recognized underneath the civil engineering discipline. So in Massachusetts, there's no stamp or official title of a structural engineer. It's a professional engineer practicing structural engineering. However, in some, you can customize your own stamp and how it appears on the page by saying structural. However, it's all underneath civil engineering scope. You just practice what your competency is. So that's my competency. It's structural engineering, and there's no better way to get authorization to do that work in Massachusetts other than the PE stamp. Moving on past that, so I was the one who. Oops.
Did we lose you?
Nope, I'm here. Space bar. I was the one that visited the site and conducted the investigation as well as prepared the report here. As part of my investigation, we evaluated existing structural loads and the proposed structural loads. As you mentioned earlier, we came up with existing utilization of the foundation. I believe, yeah, that might have been 60% of the load, and evaluated it such that we think that more load can be applied based on the foundation components and given the additional percentage that the improvements will put on the foundation. So that's how we came up with the summary. Another part of the work that we evaluated was, and it was a big part of it, was the percentage of substantial work that we proposed for the foundation as part of substantial improvement in Massachusetts. It recognizes perimeter foundation. That work we also found would be underneath 50%, if not, very little. The foundation improvements would be mostly improved anchorage to hold down the additional vertical, lateral loads on the structure from wind. So, can I answer any further questions about items brought up for structural engineering tonight?
I don't think so, but I appreciate you clarifying that for us. Courtney?
How thick is the peat layer?
We did not conduct a geotechnical investigation. We did not find that the applied loads on the structure warranted that.
Okay, that concerns me. So
that would be evaluated by the building department, no?
No, it concerns me that was not done.
Typically,
that's not a question of it concerns me when you're building on peat, it's like building a foundation on sand. You know, I was in the business for 30 years. I know what I'm talking about. And, you know, to me, not going out there and doing a test boring and seeing how thick the peat layer is in that situation, to me, is not appropriate.
Hey, do you have to do a perk test for this, for the permitting?
I'm not sure, but I can find out for you.
Because that would address Courtney's issues. You're not adding bedrooms, correct? Well, this is on sewer, right?
Yes, it's sewer there, Jamie.
Yeah. We probably wouldn't have to do a perk test. All right.
I think
Thank you,
Kevin has a comment.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Mr. Newton?
Mr. Byrd, I believe. Mr. Byrd.
Yeah, I have no, yes, sir.
I apologize. O'Brien, sorry, confusing.
No,
Yeah,
I've made my comments, so that's all.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes. I took that exam 40 plus years ago. Actually, I took it twice. Once to get a civil ticket and once to get a sanitary ticket. Actually, I answered basically the same questions on both exams, but that's kind of my secret. The point is, it seems to me that an answer to this for everybody would be that we close the hearing tonight and attach a condition that you conduct a boring. You can evaluate the boring, and if it shows that there's a large deposit of peat, perhaps that would change your attitude. And if there is no large deposit of peat, perhaps it would reinforce your position. But that would be up to you, because unfortunately, I've been in your position. You're putting your stamp on it. You just wait. Someday you retire and your wife will tell you, we can't afford all these licenses anymore. That's it.
Thank you, I think. Pat.
I have no questions or comments. Thank you.
All right. Peter?
Yes, I have some comments. One of the comments is if the extra work is done, maybe it will save some effort in the future. But as far as I'm concerned as a commissioner, if we don't have to respond immediately to an emergency in the field and say up front that if they get the project half done and they want to do some excavation work not in the original approval, we are not going to consider it an emergency. We will just have the regular process, and the work cannot be done on the foundation until the process is done here. Alternatively, the applicant could choose to do some borings and investigate it beforehand. But I'm perfectly content if they don't want to do that, if they acknowledge that we are not going to give special emergency treatment to a project half done. That's it.
Well said. Steve?
No additional comments or questions. Thank you.
All right. Nate and or Nick, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't.
Okay. Kevin and or Alyssa, do you have anything you want to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay. Can you tell me if there's any public chat, comments, questions, please?
I do not see any public chat at this time.
Thank you. All right. What's your pleasure, folks?
I
Make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
I will second it reluctantly.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing and take it under advisement. And again, just to note, there's no public comments or questions. So I'm calling for the vote. This is to close the hearing. Betsy?
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney?
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin?
O'Brien, aye.
Pat?
Harris, aye.
Peter?
Walsh, aye.
Steve?
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have closed the hearing. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, everybody.
Beautiful picture, Nate.
Thank you. Nice seeing you at Coonamessett over the weekend.
Yeah.
Next up, continued hearings under notice of intent. And bear with me one second. Kevin, remind me, Mr. Newton, we're going to open these simultaneously, correct?
Next yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so consider that formal notice. We're going to open the next two simultaneously, and I will read them both off for the record. So next up are Judith and Thomas Stetson, 0 Quistit Avenue, parcel 50-03-003A 000, Woods Hole, Mass. For permission to conduct repairs and ordinary maintenance to an existing licensed stone and concrete pier, along with Joshua Bernstein, trustee, 282 Quistit Avenue, nominee trust, 282 Quistit Avenue, Woods Hole, Mass. For permission to repair 2 existing licensed seawalls. All right, Mr. Newton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have promoted Mr. David Martin to present.
Mr. Martin, you're up, sir.
I am. Give me one moment. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for opening the hearings simultaneously. And with your permission, I'll share the screen.
Yes, sir.
Oh my goodness, it never comes up the way I expect. Let's see what happens. Sorry about that. Is that working?
Not yet.
Dave, before you start, I mean, it's okay with what you're doing. I just want to ask Betsy a question about the quorum. This wasn't open, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We're starting afresh.
Thought so, but we lost your screen, Dave.
Yeah, I'm just going to restart that process. I left that drawing open as a PDF, and my apologies for not being
David, if you need assistance, I can always open up the plan as well.
Why don't you go ahead so we don't take everyone's time with my struggling along here. Apologize.
No problem. So you're using the same site plan, right?
For both properties. One property, the Stetson property, is embedded within the Bernstein property.
Okay.
And there's an overview. You'll see on the right, the drawing Quistit Avenue. To the left are the shoreside structures. We could zoom in generally in the shoreside area, Kevin. We can talk about specific areas a little further to the south. If you'll see that little triangular shaped line, that is a very small lot that contains the concrete pier. The shoreward end of that pier was damaged by a severe storm a number of years ago. The concrete and stonework has all been broken up. Other than that, the pier is in otherwise good condition. The proposed work would create a temporary road across the grass field down to an enclosed staging area shown on the plan, silt fence and biosock. And the damaged portion of the pier would be removed with a mini excavator hauled off-site. Formwork would be constructed on either side of the pier, and concrete would be poured in place to replace what has been damaged. That basically sums it up for the Stetson project. While I was looking at that pier, I couldn't help but notice off to the right and the left, particularly to the right, the cut stone wall was in failure, but let's look at the riprap for starters. I investigated the riprap in section CC, which is owned part of the Bernstein project, and it became immediately clear that our section of the pier, Stetson section of the pier, was the only possible access to that riprap. That riprap is in progressive failure. It's not in complete failure at this point in time. It was constructed simply by rowing stones up along the landform. There's no filter fabric, there's no bedding stone. There are some settlement areas within the riprap where it's been washed out and the stones are moving into the bank there. This is an opportune time, probably the only time, to reconstruct that riprap. So I spoke with the Bernsteins and they saw the plus side of that and asked we proceed with their filing. So we would use the travel over the broken portion of the pier to gain access to the riprap, reconstruct in place, remove and replace with the same stones, place bedding stone and filter fabric, and reconstruct the riprap in the same location with the same footprint. The same is true with the cut stone wall to the north on the plan. It is in complete failure. Perhaps the same storm that damaged the concrete pier washed out behind the cut stone wall. Large sections of the wall went into complete failure and broke off. This is also an opportune time to simply take the damaged portion of the wall away. The remainder of the wall is all fractured. Remove that and reconstruct that wall in the same location, same elevation, same dimensions. The difference in this case, that wall appears to me as though it was built by hand. All of the stones are small enough that one or two persons could place them by hand. So it's quite an early wall. The problem is they don't have the mass necessary to withstand the energy there. So the new wall would be built seaward face in the same place, but larger stones. We'd have filter fabric and stone behind the wall too. So current day standards. And that's generally the project, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, sir. All right. Kevin, you want to start?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, 1 second. I believe our staff really only had a question regarding, well, let me start off with the question. We've already talked about this prior to the hearing, but so you filed with MISA for this, you've had your MISA review?
Yes, sir. That was the cause for the continuance. When I filed the notice of intent, I also filed with NHESP, Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, And I had anticipated that it would not be necessary to file with MISA because they have an exemption built into their regulations for single-family homes, driveways, septic systems, associated work. And I thought I would fall under that exemption. That turned out not to be the case. They requested a filing. We prepared a filing, filed with MISA, and they returned a finding of no take, which is their terminology for their approval.
Thank you. And the other question that we had was regarding that little salt marsh patch there. Do you anticipate going anywhere near that salt marsh? And if so, have you thought about ways to mitigate damage to that resource?
If you let, you'll see in the cross section, we've shown the limit of the salt marsh at the landward side. It's on the order of 5 to 10 feet away from the cut stone wall. It's a little salt marsh, but it's actually a very glorious little salt marsh. It's incredibly healthy. Everybody involved, we've already working with the contractors, the property owners, everyone clearly understands the value of it and its importance. So that's been made clear. We do not intend to work in the salt marsh at all. The work closest to the salt marsh would involve removing one course of stone. There's sort of a loose armor stone. It's more of a wave break stone that lay against the wall above the salt marsh line, setting that aside so that the wall could be replaced in kind, and those stones would then be replaced where they came from.
Okay. Yeah, on a similar note, so none of that stone has actually fallen into that salt marsh and needs to be removed?
That is true. They're a very different type of stone. The wall stone is primarily cut stone in rectangular pieces. Those stones, which are a wave break stone that you see as a loose riprap, are very random shape, roughly all the same size, more of a triangular type of thing. And there's no sign that they have fallen there from the wall whatsoever.
All right. No further questions unless Alyssa has something to add.
I think I'm all set. Thank you. Just in talking with with Jen yesterday, her concern about the salt marsh was even if you were going to put any matting over the salt marsh as you did work. But that was my last comment.
Thank you. All right, Betsy.
Yeah, so Dave, you're not touching the salt marsh at all. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. We really are not going anywhere near it. We don't want to touch it.
It is pretty, isn't it?
It's glorious. It's extremely healthy, and it's completely off limits.
Yeah. So, and one other comment for those of you who visited this site, there's a rain garden there that we approved, I don't know how many, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, that, you approve these things and it's not that often we get to go back to see how things turned out, but that rain garden is spectacular. So that was this is an interesting project to go check out. That's all. I have no questions about what you're planning to do.
All right. Courtney?
I'm fine with it.
All right. Kevin?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Pat?
No questions, thank you.
Peter?
No questions. Thank you.
Steve?
No questions. I agree. It's a beautiful site.
Yeah, it does.
I'll move
All
to
right.
close the hearing and take it under advisement
All right.
after we hear from the
Hold.
chat.
Thank you. Kevin, is there anything in the public chat function?
I do not see any public chat at this time.
Okay. So to be clear, I'm going to call for the vote separately on both. I know we opened them simultaneous. The idea was that they're, compatible projects. So companionable projects. But I think for the record, since there's 2 separate applications, we're going to call for 2 separate votes. So
I'll withdraw my motion.
But now you get to make two. All right. So let's go with, how do we have it listed? Stetson, 0 Quistit Ave first.
I'll move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Harris, second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to close the hearing, and this is for 0 Quistit Ave. Betsy.
Untitled aye.
Courtney.
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin.
O'Brien, aye.
Pat.
Harris, aye.
Peter.
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
All right, it is unanimous. We have closed this hearing. And for the record, it was asked and there were no public comments. All right, now for 282 Quistit Ave.
Move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Thank you.
Harris, second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. And again, there were no public comments. Betsy.
Untitled aye.
Courtney.
Bird, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin.
O'Brien, aye.
Pat.
Harris, aye.
Peter.
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have closed this hearing. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you all, and special thanks to Kevin Newton. Have a good night, you guys.
Night, Dave.
Have a good night, Dave.
All right, next up, Robert B. and Elaine M. Bailey, trustees. The Elaine M. Bailey 2013 Revocable Trust, 132 Little Neck Bars Road, West Falmouth, Mass. For permission to conduct invasive species management, installation plantings, and to construct a patio, front walkway, and increase the size of the driveway. Mr. Newton.
Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until September 29th. This request came in very late, and that's why it was not on the agenda.
Yeah, this is like the 5th continuance.
It's more than that. May I just read them off, Jamie?
Please do.
It was 5/26, 6/16, 6/30, 7/21, 8/4, 8/25, 9/15.
The reason for this continuance is that there were no stakes out in the field for us to review. So we had reached out to the applicant and informed them of that. And finally, we're able to get in touch today to get a continuance because it does not make sense to review the project without actually seeing what is in front of you.
Yeah, 4 months is a short time to get the project staked. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's
So
not
what are they
your,
asking for?
it's not your, it's not Kevin and Alyssa's
No, I'm not saying
problem.
that.
No, I know you're
I'm
not. But
just frustrated with, I don't want to say anything in public. All right, so what's the date, Kevin? I'm sorry.
No problem. It is September 29th.
Jamie, well, we're not opening the hearing. Well, never mind. I'll talk to Kevin and Alyssa. I have another concern about the plan. Maybe they can talk before.
Absolutely, sure.
All right, so I don't know that it matters, but do we have a DEP number?
Yep, 25-4652.
The only comment
Just because I had a note that there was no DEP, that's why I was asking.
Yeah, my only comment is, and I agree, there's been tons and tons of extensions or continuances, but some of that was for technical things like getting a DEP number and so on.
That was only one.
Yeah.
So the
If
rest
my
of it,
memory serves me correctly, it was because their consultant gave birth to a baby.
oh yeah, I knew there was some kind of extenuating circumstance.
Right.
So, I don't think we can blow up the applicant altogether, in fairness. We have to look at the baby. But
exactly.
I would also say that it's quite possible, and this is not to excuse them, I would agree about the staking. It has to be staked, and it should be staked, and it should be continued if it isn't staked. But it's quite possible that it was staked, and all of the continuances that went on stakes have a way of disappearing over a long period of time. And I
That's
think,
true too.
So I think, it's unfortunate there have been this many continuances, but we got to be a little bit understanding in that situation. That's the only
All right,
thing.
what have you done with the real Courtney?
Well, I can't be a curmudgeon every time,
Well,
I think it's a relative.
all right, thank you for the levity. So they're requesting a continuance to 9/29. What are you thinking?
I'll move that this be continued to 9/29.
Harris, second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to continue this hearing until 9/29. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney,
Hopefully I for the last time.
yeah. Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Harris, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Aye.
All right, and I'm not asking for public comment because it's a continuance. So we're unanimous. It is continued until 9/29. Next up are hearings under an enforcement order. First up, William T. Dowling Jr., trustee, Venus Realty Trust. Number 6, Scallop Cove, East Falmouth, Mass. Unpermitted removal of vegetation within conservation jurisdiction. Mr. Newton or Alyssa? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Alyssa is going to take the lead on these, and I will be here as well to provide further information.
Perfect. Kevin, can you promote Mr. Dowling?
Alyssa is his first name, Bill.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Dowling, you need to accept the promotion to panelist. Thank you.
And you're on mute and you have no video. We need both.
It's his first time on Zoom, so we practiced the other day. There we go.
Start my video, yes?
Please.
No video yet. Yeah, you can turn it on. There we go.
Go.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
I can start by giving a little background on the enforcement here. Staff received a phone call in late July complaining of a bunch of trees being taken down near the Tajmu Drive area. So I went out there and looked around and I could see that it was, the activity was occurring at 6 Scallop Cove. So I made my way over there. I met Mr. Dowling and I let him know that this type of activity wasn't allowed. Any kind of tree removal would require a permit and all activity was ceased at that moment. Jen and I visited him about a week later, walked the property. Definitely a lot of trees were removed and the understory. So we prompted Mr. Dowling to consult some engineers and try to get a survey. And I know that he's actively pursuing some quotes right now, and he can touch more on that. And a restoration plan will follow in the future. I added some photos on the staff report just for reference of the site. It is a heavily wooded area, and the latter 3 photos show what it currently looks like now. Mr. Dowling, if you'd like to say anything, you can go right ahead.
No, everything that you said is, I believe, accurate. I'm trying to retain Holmes and McGrath. In fact, Nathan was out here a week or so ago to walk the land. I've yet to receive any material from them, but it seemed to me, because that company had done work on this property previously, that they made the most sense to do the work.
Very good. At this point, I think we can turn it over to commissioners. Mr. Dowling's been really great to work with and very responsive. And once he received our enforcement letter, he started pursuing quotes for a survey. I'm all set.
Kevin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to add that, the first step in this process would be to get a updated professional survey to delineate the area of disturbance. And then at that point, the commission can look at remediation methods, whether that be planting the area or by some other means. So we're sort of waiting right now for that survey.
So you guys recommending a continuance for this?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to poll commissioners anyway for comments or questions. Peter. Steve?
No questions.
No questions, thank you.
Kevin?
No questions, thank you.
Courtney?
So we're looking for a continuance, and so the basic reason we're looking for continuance is to have an engineer on board that draws a plan and then has something for us to be concerned about. What is a reasonable time frame for this to get done?
If you're asking me, I asked that same question of the surveying company, and they wouldn't give me a definite answer, but they said, quote, "We are very busy," unquote.
And this was Holmes and McGrath?
That's correct.
Everybody's busy. I mean, we know that, right?
We do know that. Well, we got to have a deadline on it. I mean, so that's really where I'm at. Are we talking about 3 months, 2 months?
I don't think we should go that long, at least. I mean, I don't know, Kevin, what you're thinking, but I'm thinking if we give them 30 days to get a response from Holmes and McGrath, we can always revisit it. But I don't think we want to kick it that far down the road.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate here. A month. Let me just see what dates we have. So we are not meeting on October 13th.
All right, before you go with
But you
that,
are meeting.
I want to see
Sure.
if Betsy has any questions or comments.
Thanks, Jamie. No, I don't have any comments.
Okay. I know it's preliminary. If there's anything that anybody had a concern with, I wanted it addressed so Mr. Dowling would know it now instead of waiting, whatever the time frame is and then getting hit with it. Courtney, you had something else?
The only thing I would do, my recommendation would be to go back to Holmes and McGrath and say, this is what we need done. How soon can you get it done? And if it isn't going to fit a reasonable time frame, maybe you should look to another firm.
All right, I can do that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if Jen or Alyssa have had this discussion with you, but I think it would be prudent to have Holmes and McGrath or you hire to locate by individual tree what has been removed from that buffer zone. So I would reiterate that to Holmes and McGrath.
Yeah, so maybe Mr. Dowling, in your next conversation with them, if you encourage them to speak with staff, and they would clarify what the needs are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we
Did we
mentioned
lose you?
property and the remaining stumps, and to try to determine what species they were, if possible.
Okay. All right, Kevin, would you come up with a fair date?
Okay, so it's September 15th right now. 1 month from now will be 10/13. You're not meeting that date. 10/20, you are meeting. Would you like to continue to 10/20?
I think that has to be a request by the applicant.
Mr. Dowling,
I'm sorry.
Is 10:20 okay for you?
10/20, as far as I know, without looking at my dance card, would be fine.
All right. At the request of the applicant, I'll make a motion to continue this to October 20th.
Second.
Okay.
Third, second, if I didn't get another one.
No, too slow. All right. So, Mr. Dowling, in the meantime, if you do speak with Holmes and McGrath and they give you, an idea and we want to push this out, just let staff know and we'll go from there. All right, so we have motion and a second to continue this until 10:20. Betsy?
Gladfelter, aye.
Courtney?
Bird eye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin?
O'Brien, aye.
Pat?
Harris, aye.
Peter?
Walter, aye.
Steve?
And aye.
It is unanimous. We've continued this enforcement order until 10:20. Thank you, Mr. Dowling.
Thank you all. And thank
I have one more comment. Mr. Dowling, I know you're working with Alyssa. Make sure before you go back to Holmes and McGrath or to whoever you get, you know exactly what we're looking for. It's not just a site plan. We need specific information.
Okay, is that something I can get directly from Alyssa?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I'll send you an email.
thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good
Right.
night.
Right, sir.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
All right. Next up is continued hearings under an enforcement order. Kevin, remind me, we're going to open these simultaneously? No, we have to do them separate. Never mind. I already asked that. First up, Charlotte Mills Siler, 0 Nashawina, Lot 2A, West Falmouth, Mass. Failure to install mitigation and restoration plantings according to Mass DEP number 25-3969. Kevin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Alyssa, this is going to be Hannah that we are promoting here. Oh, you're on mute, Alyssa. Okay.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, Hannah Raddatz, I think you pronounce it.
Okay.